Hello, and we are, I think we're live. Yeah, we are live. Hello, good evening and welcome to Broadsheet on the Telly. My name is John Posterous Ryan. You're very welcome. On the panel tonight are the very lovely Johnny Keenan from Kilkenny, the even lovelier Neil Curran, a new father to Sadie, and new to the show, but not to the sheet, Tony Groves, financial consultant, soon to be marathon runner on Sunday on the Dublin City Marathon, and you can sponsor him or fundraise for him. We'll give Tony.
I'll plug that. Don't you worry about it. I'm not short of a plug.
Okay, we'll plug that. Oh, sorry, by the way, welcome to all Broadsheet readers, commenters, and all you trolls. And also with us is Derek Mooney. I've known Derek about 20 years, but I didn't see him for about 18 years of those 20 years.
Derek, it's the best way to know you, yeah.
But when I didn't meet Derek, for a period, he worked for the last Fianna Fáil government. And we're going to hold that against him for the rest of the show.
Only the show. If it's only the show, I'm happy.
Derek is a Broadsheet columnist. His column appears every Tuesday, and he specialises, I think, you're safe to say, in Northern Ireland, the Brexit negotiations.
Yeah, that would be the two that would be lighting my fire at the moment. Yeah.
We were going to cover the tracker thing. Perhaps I can go to you first, Derek. What would a Fianna Fáil Minister for Finance do differently than Pascal Donoghue was doing?
Well, based on what they've been saying and what Michael McGrath's been saying over the last 2 to 3 years, it would have been, number one, was to say, look, that we've tried the softly approach to the banks, and it's time to bring the guards in. There has to be extra personal responsibility. And also is that we need to flesh out, why is it that all the banks seem to be doing the same thing at the same time and then telling us that there's no, I won't say collusion, but that there's been no interplay between them. So I would imagine that those would be the two areas they would focus on first. But certainly is that to have, rather than just bringing them in and admonishing them, is actually turning around and saying, look, this is time to get serious. Now, bear in mind that a lot of this started when Fianna Fáil was in government back in 2009. Yeah. So like we've been around the track on this, no pun intended, several times. So it's time to get serious.
Yeah, but serious, like that's kind of words. Bringing in the guards again. What charges?
What is it? But basically, it's that it has to come to what we've been told up to now is this is a systemic problem. This is an institutional problem. There's an element of that, but there people are making actual decisions. These things didn't happen because the system failed or because somebody was accidentally taken off tracker and put onto a fixed rate. It happened because the decisions were made. And these decisions, like we saw this, it was happened on the exchange rate, I think it was in Allied Irish about a decade ago, where there was a definite decision made at a senior management level not to give the going rate. So these are decisions, and the decisions made by individuals, and the individuals have to be held accountable for them.
Tony, could you explain to me why? Could you explain to me the central bank's role in this, and why can't we apply pressure on the central bank?
The central bank have known about this since 2010. It's as simple as that. I can tell you from first-hand experience, the central bank have known about this since 2010. They chose to take the procedure where the central bank work on as an impartial advisor. So they will say that we will look at the facts of the case and we will only give you, we will remain impartial, and then if we need to make a judgment at the end, we'll make a finding. If in the meantime the bank then comes to you and makes a settlement, we will then actually we won't go so far as to name and shame, or we won't make a partial judgment or so on and so forth. In 2010, there were a few individual cases taken to the central bank, after the banks had actually said, you're not getting back your tracker. The central bank said, oh, well, we're looking at it, and on balance, we think you need to relook at it again. The banks rolled back and gave these individual customers back their tracker rates. Right. The central bank then, therefore, never has to actually make it a finding back and doesn't have to name and shame the bad guys, and chose never to go deeper into the actual, was this widespread, was it just was it just a few standalone cases? That's actually, the central bank's completely compromised here. The other issue is obviously the Central Bank Act changed in 2013. So in 2013, the laws were given to them for more enforcement, to be able to go back on these. But these things actually predate that. And not only do they predate that now, they're outside the statute of limitations. The banks are 7 years in terms of data protection. And I mean, there's all sorts of ways now where we've left it so long. But here's the question that no one has really said, is how come the Department of Finance and the Central Bank haven't seen that? Oh, when we looked at the bank's balance sheets, on 2009 there was 150,000 tracker mortgages, and then in 2011 there was only 100. Did these people just give up their tracker rates? Because what sort of lunatic gives up their tracker rate? I mean, people knew it's as simple as that those things, but it was improving the bank's balance sheets, and it was actually improving the liquidity gap that we had. And because it was better to pretend that you didn't know, it was better not to open Pandora's box.
Yeah, I mean, the amount of money we're talking about here. Vanessa Foran, who was on last week, said this could bust some of the banks.
Well, like potentially, like if you think PPI in the UK, the repayment protector scandal in the UK, which was basically you take out a loan, you get this insurance with your loan, and it's to cover a car loan or a holiday loan or whatever it is, and this was, the banks were found to be acting negligently with this insurance policy for literally something as basic as a car loan. They were fined billions. Now what we're looking at here is tantamount to 100 times worse than that. But again, the central bank is restricted because the maximum fine under the current legislation is 10 million. So so fines are even restricted.
And isn't there a clause since the crash that, I mean, are deposits at risk here?
Well, deposits are like, there's 100,000 per customer, so a joint account is 200,000. That's still covered under the deposit retention scheme. So that's still actually in situ. That's an EU protection. That's not just Ireland.
Okay, yeah. No, there was a comment on the site today that says, he said some clause kicks in where the deposits are at risk.
You can have a bail-in and burn depositors and effectively have a bail-in, but that doesn't come in. That the €100,000 protection is still in place. So you'd want to have a serious amount of money on deposit. And other people who have that type of money, they tend to layer it around the banks so they're not exposed at that level.
Right. Derek, sorry, I get to Tony. I'll get to Neil and Johnny. I just want to sort of get the political thing. So a Fianna Fáil government would bring in the guards. Mm-hmm. Well, under what charges?
It is because what Tony has indicated there and the rest of it, that people were moved when there was no need for, when there was no requirement to move them. They shouldn't have been moved. They had contracted for.
Who would you arrest?
Which? Because we're talking about that, if bank officials, senior bank officials, either directorate level, senior managers, whatever.
Right, and I mean, everybody who was privy to the decision or had to sign off on these decisions.
It's a little bit like the situation in the guards with the 9 million point, the rest of which is, there's a certain level of authority where you would say, well, like, who has actually made the decision? Not necessarily in every case would you go after each person who has carried it out, and that you're not. I mean, just the way the banks have changed their structures anyway, these decisions are not made at a low level; they're implemented at a kind of a branch or regional level, but the decisions are not made at that level. Now, again, these things get hidden on it, which is, well, I didn't make a decision to end somebody's trackers, but I put the pressure on that certain targets had to be met, certain returns had to be met, certain accounts had to be moved from this file to that file. So I'm sure there will be a hiding behind that. But what we're saying is that up to now, everything, what we've actually said for the last decade on a lot of things are, well, this is a systemic problem. This is a systems failure. This is a systems error. Well, if we keep saying that, nothing's going to change, because these situations are not going away. And it's only when you have actual accountability. And to a certain degree, and to put it rather crudely, somebody's going to have to do what they call a perp walk. You're going to have to see somebody. If people are to have any faith and confidence in the banking system, if they have any faith and confidence in our regulatory system, and clearly people don't have faith in that, then there's going to have to be something to be accountability, and that accountability is going to become individual.
Johnny, you were furious last week about banks.
I think all the country was, John.
I beg your pardon?
I think all the country was. Yeah, I wasn't even associated with anything to do with that tracker mortgage. So yeah, I said what I said last week. It's just very frustrating. I think the banks have screwed us over since 2008, since they were allowed to be brought in by Cowan. And just basically said they're too big to fail. So, you know, I'm just going to ask a question, and hopefully it's not too far off what we're talking about, but the head of the ECB said tonight that the interest rates are going to go up again. So how can that affect Ireland if it's coming from an ECB? And if the ECB can talk about Irish interest rates or ECB interest rates inflicting Irish customers in Irish banks, surely then the ECB can deal with this situation as well, no? Or is that just a bit...
Tony?
The ECB's remit is purely, they're only concerned with inflation in the Eurozone and monetary policy. They do actually have a bigger stick than the Irish Central Bank. I'd be more afraid of, I knew from some of the banks here under UK banking licenses that they were more afraid of the Financial Services Authority in the UK than they were of the Central Bank. And that's not to say that Philip Lane isn't a good guy doing his job. He's doing his job. But what they also announced today in the ECB is that the quantitative easing is not, tap is not being turned off, which means they're going to continue to pump billions into the market every month. So realistically, interest rate hikes are only going to be minimal, and the problem that still doesn't help Ireland, because we're still paying 2 times the average mortgage rates than they are in the rest of Europe. I mean, we're being told. Sorry?
2 times.
Oh, double. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It was treble. We've got it down to double, and that's supposed to be good news for us.
Yeah, but okay, if the ECB have thrown trillions into the economy, the European economy, so that it'll sustain, that's what America did as well, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So why didn't they throw in? Why didn't they save the banks instead of the Irish taxpayer?
Well, Johnny, we took on, what is it, 42% of the bank bailout as in this 1%, and took on 1% of the EU economy took on 42% of the EU bank bailout. But what they've done, they then waited 2 years to join the quantitative easing program that the States jumped in on a lot sooner under Obama. And basically what happened then is like a few game changers. Italy's had bailouts since then. Spain have had some bailouts. And you've actually had bailouts and bail-ins, but none of them have really fallen on the taxpayers. Like, nothing has ever fallen on the taxpayers like it did in Ireland.
And we got the bailiffs as well.
Yeah. We really got the worst of it. You're spot on. Yeah.
Okay. If there are any sort of questions from people about this, I mean, Tony, you know, how does this end? I mean, does anybody know? I mean,
like, if you think about it realistically, you have a market that's overinflated. Johnny said they're pumping trillions in to prop up the economy. That money's not going into economies, it's going into assets. It's the markets are overpriced, they're overvalued, and now we have the largest bubble that makes the last property crash bubble look like I'm trying to reach for something that's much smaller, because what we've got now is, and it's global. So you have, and they want to turn off.
Can I press you on that? There is a housing bubble, you're saying, that is worse than the previous housing bubble.
I'm saying the housing bubble is based, the entire market in terms of, so the EU's printed trillions of euro, the Fed and the US have done the same. The banks have all grabbed all of this money, they have cheap credit, they have all of this money, they've fixed their balance sheets. No one's putting money on deposits because interest rates are so low globally that all asset prices are overinflated, be that property, be that shares, be that whatever it is. So you're sitting there now and they're saying, oh, we need to turn down the quantitative easing and bring it back to a normal market. But the reality is, you can't, a drug dealer can't tell a cokehead, I'm not going to give you coke anymore, without having some sort of bad effect on the system. And that's where we are. We have a system that's going to end up with a big shock, or we're going to face a long-term thing where it's going to say, okay, quantitative easing is actually the new way of the world, and we'll just raise the debt ceiling every 12 months, and we'll forever blow up a bubble and hope we get away with it.
This is sort of corporate welfare.
Yes.
As a new
As policy.
Huh?
As policy.
As policy, Neil.
Yeah, I think it's deteriorated since last week. But what I'm scratching my head about is Pascal today said that if the banks don't sort this out, he's going to attend and make his comments known officially. And I'm kind of wondering then, given the seriousness of this, at what type of event would it take for Pascal to be there from the start? I mean, clearly we're being taken for a ride here, and it feels like the banks are dictating to the central bank, who should be disbanded, wound up, or whatever happens to a central bank when they failed in their duties. And we've talked about the guards before, but central banks should be tackled first. And the Department of Finance have failed here as well. Like clearly the banks are dictating to our financial regulators, our Department of Finance, what should be happening here, and it's just beyond unacceptable. I kind of think politics should be taken out of it, really, because we can argue the toss over what political parties would do if they were in the driving seat here, but we have been failed by previous governments in this arena. So really we need to take politics out of it and appoint somebody as a regulator with the appropriate authority to take action. And the action needs to be swift and fast. As Tony mentioned about the UK, the UK are a good benchmark when a lot of regulatory issues show up in the finance sector and other sectors in terms of how fast they take action. You only had to look at the Ryanair issue and when you benchmark what their aviation authority did versus what the Irish Aviation Authority did. So until we get that approach taken with the banks, to use a pun, they're laughing on the way to the banks themselves. I'm looking at an invite here for the Ideal Home Show this weekend, which is being sponsored by Permanent TSB, and there's of course the first time buyers talks. I mean, this is like, I don't know, not the 9 o'clock news or something. I'm not seeing anything since we spoke last week that's highlighting to me that positive steps have been taken to rectify this. Now, we have seen stuff in the media about where banks are in terms of their progress, but it's nothing substantial that would reassure the citizens of the country that our money is safe in the hands of these institutions.
Sorry, Neil. Do you believe those statistics, the ones that the banks have provided?
Well, I think we're all in the same boat when we say no. It's very hard to take it without a pinch of salt.
Yeah.
Again, accountability and action is needed here, and we often hear the guards should be sent in, but I agree with Derek. People have to be held to account here, have to be charged, and the buck stops with the bank's directors.
Can I just ask, maybe Tony can answer this? How can people on track mortgages have their house repossessed? I mean, what judge would allow this to happen?
Well, I mean, realistically, if you think about the people who have, like, there's 23 people who did lose their homes that are already known about. Of course, it's more than that, because at that time there was only 12,000 cases of trackers removed. We're up to 20,000 this week, and it ain't going to stop till we hit around the 30,000 mark. Let's tell the truth here. So those people who've lost their homes, the judge isn't taking cognizance of that, because that case has been heard and seen generally through the bank's own internal complaints procedures. I mean, you've seen where someone's come in and then it's presented to them as a fait accompli that you actually signed for this fixed rate appendix, which meant that you gave up your tracker rate, which is obviously goes against what the central bank is supposed to maintain, that you give best advice. But clearly they weren't given best advice. Like, imagine going to a doctor and telling him I have a headache, and he deciding that you need to lose a limb. That's not best advice. And the doctor would be considered negligent here. So what we have here is people who went in and they were maybe vulnerable to certain situations, albeit at the time maybe the fixed rate was a good idea, because we forget it now, but there was a time when rates were going up, and it was appropriate to sell fixed rates into the market. but it was never appropriate to then turn around and not let them know that, oh, by the way, when we got you on this, we're removing your tracker for the life of the loan that was actually in your initial contract.
Yeah. Is there anything anybody else just wants to say before we move on? I mean, on this, I just don't think there's anything to be said because nobody really knows what's going to happen.
No, I'm willing to make a. Sorry, Derek, go ahead.
No, the only quick observation is I think at one stage, and when we go back a couple of years ago, there was a hope that non-Irish banks would start to move into the Irish market, and that would help settle the market and calm the market. And by the entry of big, but then we find that KBC are one of the biggest offenders.
Yeah.
That they've come over here, and rather than twisting our system around to what would prevail elsewhere, they've immediately adapted and become more Irish than the Irish themselves. And that's a hell of an achievement.
Well, Bank of Scotland did that as well.
What can happen when you move to Ireland? You know, you tend to go native very quickly.
Well, I mean, I'm sure when they see everyone else kind of plugging away with it, and that's what leads to the idea that there is some interbank connection, that there is some cahoots going on here between the banks, that they all seem to be up to the same thing, that there is no competition, and the idea of having 2, 3, 4 pillar banks is not a good idea. It's not in the state's interest.
I think, I mean, I know that there's an aversion to conspiracy theories in Ireland, but I mean, there's clearly a cartel at work here.
See, but it doesn't have to be conspiracy to be a cartel.
No, well, I mean,
it's just everyone says, hang a second. Well, if
you're the one who's saying pull in the guard.
If you compete with us and you don't do this, well, then we're exposed and we all lose money. So it's a way of maintaining margins. And if one crowd will be maintaining margins, well, everyone else is going to continue to maintain them.
To go back on Neil's point very quickly, Johnny. Sorry, because Neil made a great point about the Europe, about the FSA and the UK acting quickly. The other point is, if you think what happened with the insurance market this year, and they said premiums came down, that was the European Commission who went in. It wasn't the Irish regulator. That was purely the EU drove that, and then now your insurance premiums have come down because they found cartel-like practices there. That wasn't our regulators.
Okay, listen.
It was wide open there before the crash. You know, Bank of Scotland had bought up every ESB shop in the country, and they were putting in their branches. Then the crash happened, and they pulled out. That's the bank, yeah. So I can't really, you know, obviously the bankers are wankers, but they've been allowed to do what they do because the legislation allowed them to do. So the legislation is the problem, really. These guys are very clever. They can see the loopholes within the law, and then they can do what they do. But I just think the ECB have to really take a lead on this, because the Irish financial system is corrupt to the core. And if they expect, as you said, to only 41% of the EU debt is being put on the shoulders of Irish taxpayers, you know, that fight has to be fought, and the politicians have to really kind of stand up and be counted. Because John McGuinness today in the Dáil, all great, well and good, like, but it's all platitudes.
And John McGuinness is
after the horse's ball bolted, like, you know.
Just on that, actually, I think that was another thing Pascal threatened, was introducing potential levies on banks if they don't sort this out, which, you know, it feels like a very dangerous move because it's only going to be passed on to the consumer.
No, that's the problem.
Anyway, so
and your scope for manoeuvre is highly limited.
Derek, can you come closer to your...
Sorry, they're saying that their scope from the problem. That's exactly the point, which is in terms of you find the banks, you levy penalties on the banks, and the banks just pass it through the system. And that's why there has to be, at some point, there has to be individual accountability. That's not going to fill the coffers, but there has to be a realization that, no, if you get something, if you screw something up that seriously wrong, you will pay a price for it. There has to be corporate responsibility. I
think the banks, I mean, have gone kind of full mad now. You know, they've gone full tough. You know, they don't really care what people think of them now. You know,
the same Wolf of Wall Street. You know, all bets are off.
I mean, despite sort of sponsoring the Ideal Homes exhibition, I think they're at a stage where they just, you know, they don't care. I mean, can you find an ATM? Can you know, there's no loyalty or anything like that anymore at all.
Well, like, I accept that they're businesses, but, you know, well, yeah. Anyway.
No, Neil, you make a good point, and I do think that there's an element of whereby recalcitrant banks are now at the stage where it's the same, but don't just think it's confined to banks, guys. If a bank pays a fine of of 10 million quid, and that's what let's say they're facing a maximum fine of 10 million quid for malfeasance that could potentially earn 100 million quid. It's the same principle of a lobbying group going into the Dáil and saying, listen, we're going to spend 3 million on this crew that are going to lobby the government, that we can then get some land deal done that'll make us all 200 million. It's small, it's money well spent.
A real threat to the banks would, rather than saying bank levies and the likes, would be to say we'll no longer allow you to sell your mortgage products on our market or something to that effect, because that's going to hit their shareholders and it's going to hit the bonus packets of people at the top.
Derek, can I just ask you one question? Did this all emerge because after Noonan sort of retired? I mean, is this is all in his?
Michael Noonan is capable of a lot of things. I don't think he's capable of keeping this under wraps. No, it hasn't. Because
was he not aware of this growing issue, though? No.
I'm sure he was, in the sense that, like, the Department of Finance has been aware of this, as Tony pointed out from day one. This is not something new. But the problem, the difficulty is from this, and again, the point was made earlier about not scoring political points, which is this is such a big issue that there is no. It's not Michael Noonan. The Minister for Finance isn't pulling the levers on this. Is that there are communications between senior officials in the Department of Finance and the banks, and it was the Lord Denning thing, the appalling vista. And the big scare is that the banks collapse or that the banks implode and they take everyone else with them.
I know, but as Tony said, how come it's suddenly these huge numbers now when we assumed it was a lot less?
Because basically this thing has been pursued since, and the simple fact is, what's brought it to is that Kisan and the number of people who are now taking cases or taking group actions and taking etc. Which is, people are saying we're not taking this anymore, and people are saying, hang a second, and if you're threatened with losing your house, or you're certainly threatened by the fact that you're dealing with €800 a month more than you need to be paying, well, of course you're going to get angry, and of course you're going to speak out. So, but it's if anything, it's grassroots up. I don't think it's a kind of somebody in the Department of Finance after Michael Noonan's gone out the door said, "Oh Jesus, look at this file he's been hiding away." No, it's not. It's nowhere near that conspiratorial.
No, I'm not suggesting that. The timing seems a little bit weird. I mean, it does allow Pascal to say, "Hey, not on my watch."
Except he was the junior minister there. You can't.
I was in school when this happened.
What's this about you, John? You were about to say you couldn't find an ATM. Is this because you're in a...
No, I meant I think the banks are just...
well, the gas part is which is they're closed. They're reducing their counter services in branches. I mean, if you ever go to change coins from a charity box, you'll realise the banks only accept coins at certain times of the day. And the last time I was in the bank, I just asked them, well, what day do I come in with 20s? What day do I come in with 50s? What day do I come in with 5s?
You're not supposed to take the money from the Troker box. You know that? No, it has to go back to Troker.
You're rumbled, Derek. You're rumbled.
Damn.
Derek had a point there in relation to another thing. I'm the voice.
Can you come closer to your?
Sorry, John. Yeah. Ireland. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very muddy.
Okay. Right. So just picking up on Derek's kind of point. The banks were closing in rural Ireland, they are closing in rural Ireland, and still people are out there, save our bank, while the banks are screwing them. The irony is unbelievable. So, in that regard, can the government not say, in relation to AIB, you could do your AIB banking in the post office, and then how many credit unions are associated with bank or would associate with any government, with the financial department? Is there any?
They're all.
Is there an opportunity for ethical banking in relation to moving forward, if you like?
Does this German?
Is there an example like Iceland? Is Iceland an example to look at?
Well, there's a German outfit trying to come in with the post offices in Ireland, isn't there? I forget the name, but he was on the radio the other week. It sounded.
But if you look at Germany's an extremely good example where there are community banks and there are smaller banking systems, and it is a smaller banking, there are the Deutsche Banks and the Commerce Banks and the big behemoths, but there's also a lot of the Volksbank and smaller little Post Bank or whatever they call themselves. There's a whole range. There's a range of banking services here. We've gone for this 2-pillar or 3-pillar model. So it's Bank of Ireland, Allied Irish.
We had the small banks there. had the small banks, they were building societies, and they all became parts of the conglomerates in the end.
They wanted to demutualize.
So what's that, Derek?
When they started to demutualize.
Yeah, indeed. Well, moving on to subject we were talking about just before the show started. I wasn't even sure whether we would go through it, but there does seem to be certain aspects to it that are definitely worth commenting on. This is the Tom Humphreys story. I suppose the aspect, what have you thought of the media coverage of it, Neil?
I'm probably not as much up to date in the last couple of days, but yeah, I did that. Dunphy's comments weren't. It's crazy. But this is all coming out of the woodwork. It's it's not just isolated. We're seeing this big wave, and for good reason as well. The Harvey Weinstein case, there's a lot more people coming forward. But I was just shocked at some of the. I mean, what was it? Was it Dunphy that said this is, we have to be careful by trial by media? Now, I'd normally agree with that comment, but there's absolutely no defense in this case. But yeah, hopefully this brings more people speaking out about. I suppose this is a little bit different than, but anyway, maybe there's someone who's a little bit more up to date in the last day or so on it than me.
Johnny?
Yeah, I don't know. It's absolutely shocking. The victim in this is kind of gone by the wayside, and she's just another victim. And no kind of, I don't know. Tom Humphrey is a national treasure amongst the writing elite in this country. He's such a beautiful writer, and he's such a great man. He's obviously a great writer. 16,000 texts in a few months. That's a lot of writing, all right. And I'm going to have a go at your man, Don Logue, Cork guy. The first time I came across him, he's a good friend of Humphrey's. Might have had something to do with Humphrey's Shadow Ghostie's book. Does that make him a good friend? The first time I seen Ghostwriter, sorry, Don. The first time I seen Don Logue, he was on the Saturday Night Show with Simon Coveney. Basically, like two lads on the rip. Oh, we're going to change the country. And I thought this guy was a goalie for Cork, and now all of a sudden he's changing the country. And now he's writing a letter for a friend. So obviously the other guy who did write the letter, they have a long relationship of being journalists together. So they probably were friends. Don Logue, he hasn't been nothing said since. The point I'm making is that I'm sick of people jumping to the defense of people they don't really know. And even after, the thing is, I thought I knew Humphreys could have been the but still saying, the guy is reasonably okay. That's pathetic. He is obviously not. He's a sick guy who needs to go to prison the same way as every other paedophile needs to be dealt with. Not less, because he's a journalist and he's a great guy. And the idea of the sickening part of this is that you would give a reference to someone within a case such as that. That defies logic. And it did figure with the judge. She said that she did take into consideration the two references. So the two references came from a journalist and a hurler. So are they the pillars of society now? Is that the way it is?
That shouldn't be permitted in cases like this, character references, not for something that went on as long as it did. They're wholly irrelevant.
The whole point about it is that for the judge to make a decision, and they do weigh what's put in front of them. Now, I mean, in terms of everyone's entitled to put the best defence they can forward. And in this case, there's no defence against the offence. The offence is despicable and horrendous. So there's no defence against that. But there is kind of saying, well, look, I am whatever I am, this is out of character for this person or whatever. That's somebody else's judgment. All it is somebody else's judgment. And clearly those judgments are wrong. And the judge needs to take that into account. And sorry, not say need to take that again. They can take them into account. They can say, hang a second, you think you know them, but you don't know them. So, but I'm a little bit uneasy at the pillaring of Walsh and Don Logue. They haven't committed an offence. They've shown very bad judgment. They've shown that they don't have a good read of somebody, but they haven't committed an offence in and of themselves. And it's the one part where I do feel a little bit uneasy about, which is a lot of this is knowing things after the fact. And if there's so many things, if I'd known them at the time, I would have acted differently. I didn't. And I just think there's a little bit a little bit over the top on that one. But I mean, there's no question. I mean, regarding the offence, regarding what he's done, I think there's a very good argument that the penalty and the punishment is insufficient. It's well below the threshold.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the reason I make that point, Derek, but the reason I brought that up is because it was influential. It was influential. Those two references was influential. Obviously, everyone makes a bad judge of. She said it. Did the judge not say that? Or maybe it mightn't have been.
No, I don't think it was a specific reference to.
She took it into consideration.
She said what the judge said was the judge's actual words were that because he was a public figure, his fall from grace was higher. He further to fall, and it was as if that gave him some, and that really sticks in everybody's mouth. So because if he'd been an electrician from Crumlin, that would have somehow meant he would have been dealt with differently, and that sticks in the craw of most civilized, normal people, thinking people.
Yeah. Okay, but I know that an awful lot of paedophilia exists in the home. But when you bring it out in relation to what the priests have done, and now this guy was also a mentor for a camogie team, this is how these people infiltrate, and it's shocking to say in an island of 5.5 million people that this is all too prevalent. So these guys are, they're really amongst us, and it could have happened in a swimming team, which it did. It could have happened in a rugby situation, which it might have done. So I'm not just having to go with the GEA, but the clubs really need to start looking at who exactly is around the clubs and where exactly they're coming from, because.
But most large cultural organizations,
I think the kids
have a child protection.
Johnny,
there are systems in place. I'm not saying I can't speak to anyone, but I know from talking to friends of mine who are child psychologists that most large-scale organizations are required. They're required under, for example, to get people to get prior approval. If you're working with children, you need to be vetted. If you're joining the Red Cross, you need to be vetted. So that there are systems there.
I find it extraordinary that the GAA have made no comments about this, but they did mention something, that there was a stripper at some club the other night. I think.
Valley regret.
Yeah, I have to say, in terms of myself and Derek were talking beforehand, and Mary Kenny got into trouble for this, saying that there was, this is at the lower end of paedophilia or abuse. I'm not going into that at all, but the coverage I thought was disproportionate, because I don't think Tom Humphries is particularly liked among I don't think he's liked certainly by sports journalists. Not David Walsh, but I think his interview with Roy Keane certainly made him a lot of enemies. And I feel with the Walsh and Cusack as well that there are other agendas at play here, that the coverage is disproportionate because of those aspects of it. Is that saying too much, Tony?
Look, you're talking to someone who taught a lot of David Walsh, loved his writing, loved his things, and I'm very disappointed. I think Hugh McKenna's written beautifully on this in the last few weeks, and said how, and again, I think Neil made the point as well, talking in context of Harvey Weinstein and talking about this culture of, I don't know whether you want to call it the locker room culture, or the friends that are in our circle, or whatever it is, that we just give it the benefit of the doubt. And it's all very well and good for four men to be sitting on a panel here now discussing this. It reeks of we know where the line is and we draw the line, and I think we don't. And I think it's more in terms of the female voices in this have actually been put to the side in favor of what's actually happening, in terms of a few lads either settling scores, or a few lads who are pals of the other fella. So I've no time for either side in that. I do, as I said, I think Ewan wrote well on it, and I think he was spot on when he said that what errors of judgment aside, you don't. There's certain things that we don't have a play. Our voices shouldn't be welcome or used. I think it was Johnny said it as well. Why do you have a character reference when it comes to this certain type of sexual, what is effectively a sexual trial. You know, you can't have these kind of things, and I think it's just wrong.
But it just goes back to show how manipulative he is, because he is the perpetrator in all this, Humphreys. So what he did, like, and now I actually did think about when you raised the point about Keane. You know, what was his motive then? Was he looking to get that story and overdo Roy Keane in Saipan? You know, you don't know what kind of character this guy is. He's capable of anything. He hounded down and groomed a young teenage girl, you know, relentlessly. I don't know how she's doing. Hopefully she's okay. And his family, fair play to his family.
I have to say that,
you know, weren't having any of it. You know, if more families took the lead from that, if you're, and the thing is, what is a paedophile? It's not a dirty old man. It's a very intelligent. It seems to be across the board. There's no actual caricature of a paedophile, but it needs to be understood and it needs to be found out how these people operate and what can be done in relation to sentencing. And I don't know, and I just think it's probably the most heinous crime you can possibly do. And they talked about chemical castration today. I think that could be something that could be looked at as a deterrent. I don't think it's right, because it could get, anything like that could get out of control. But these guys need to know. These guys need to know that it is a fucking serious thing. And if there's not serious sentences or serious things done, it'll go on. It'll go on like the banks. You know, it's not a crime unless you're caught. 10 months this guy's likely to get, Humphreys. That's a fucking holiday.
well,
You know what I mean?
yeah, I mean, I think the point the judge made was a wrong one, because, I mean, Frilly Keane, who columnist on the site, has she's been on the boards, you know, GA boards for years, 20, 25 years. He got very legal with her. He cease and desist letters and all sorts of things onto Frilly about whenever she'd would intimate anything that, you know, that what he was up to with the camogie wasn't completely above board. And then he got her barred from Wikipedia because he's that kind of guy, I guess.
Yeah. Well, he knew what he'd done was wrong, but still he coerced two guys into writing a reference for him. You know, he couldn't just take the fucking. He's have to do the crime now, do the time. No, he had to drag more people in. He's a bad fucking egg.
I think with David Walsh is that they have they go back to the Michelle Smith, and I think they bonded a lot. Those journalists, Paul Kimmage as well. I don't think he's friends with David Walsh, but they bonded over that experience, because, again, a bit like the Keane thing, the country was on Michelle Smith, and they were the guys.
Humphreys was right on that. Yeah, Humphreys was right.
Yeah.
And the other problem with that is, if you go back to David Walsh's book, he does even. This is after Humphreys was arrested. He does have the, you know, he's gone to bat for him before this reference. He's gone to bat for him in his 7 deadly sins. He's gone for bat for him on Matt Cooper's in 2013, I think it was. You know, like, you forget how long this has dragged on. Humphreys put himself into John of God or wherever it was and disappeared for a couple of years as well. You know.
Yeah. Well,
Anyway.
There's a culture thing there as well. You know, Dunphy. I like Dunphy, but I don't think he meant exactly what he said in relation to an underage case. I think it's a culture between the generations in relation to how it's worded, and I think that he was picked up on News Talk. I think especially that the new presenter that's in was looking to sensationalize that. So this is capable of getting out of control in relation to the actual wording around it.
Yeah.
But the problem is that there is a serious case of paedophilia within the country, and it needs to be addressed in relation to right across the board, regardless of fear or favor. And it's just terrible that another case like that exists.
Yeah, I think that's an important point, that at the end of the day, regardless of what Humphreys has done sports wise and all that shenanigans. A convicted paedophile is a paedophile, and that's child abuse, as Johnny said, the most heinous crime there is. There should be minimum terms, imprisonment terms for it. That sentence was incredibly lenient, and I could be talking out my arse here, but I think there was another sentence either that day or the day after for another crime that was less serious, that got a longer term. And of course, we always use the garlic tax fraud as a benchmark. That guy got 6 years, and here we have somebody convicted of a heinous crime getting far less.
Well, I have to say, we were doing the site for the last long while, particularly Nolan. Actually, he's the garlic judge. He gave very lenient sentences, and well, I've seen far worse than this, actually. And also, I would want to say something that the extradition of George Gibney is long overdue. If people have been following on the site, American journalist called Irving Munchnick is trying to find out who got him into the country, and it's taken him years to even establish who. In Ireland, gave him, was a Garda sergeant, gave his reference, and it seems to me that there is a government aspect to this, that there's a government cover-up aspect to this. So anything Humphreys, good riddance to Humphreys. But now, if the spotlight can go on to Gibney now, it would be a real bonus. I mean, there'd be something good could come out of this. I'm not sure if anybody there is. Neil, are you familiar with it?
No.
Okay. So I think it's worth re-emphasizing the point that that Humphreys was exposed by his own family.
Yeah.
And I think that is the biggest telling point on it. And that there must be even levels within that they had realized that this is something that can't just be and to be smothered over, which would have been the traditional Irish way, which is, listen, let's deal with this, we'll send them off, we'll send them for treatment, we'll send the rest of it.
Yeah.
But they decided that was the right course of action, was to go to the guards. And I think his own family are due a huge amount of, not so much praise, but recognition.
Yeah, I think
they stayed from service.
They were separated though. I mean,
understand, and that's what I'm saying, that there are layers within that. But for it to go that route, because in many of these circumstances, the traditional Irish way would have been to keep us in the back room.
But that'll give encouragement to other families now.
Precisely, yeah.
And Neil, obviously your newfound circumstances it brings a bit more emotion to this story.
Well, my view on it would be any different if my circumstances were like this. That I wouldn't like to even be thinking, thinking about that. But
No, I meant I think the chemical castration thing that Johnny was mentioning. I mean,
it's kind of that comes up a lot. No disrespect at all to Johnny. It's kind of it's an after the fact measure. Although I did read something about sex offenders who had requested to be chemically castrated, but I guess that's a different story altogether.
There is another story. The kidney one I won't go into, but the fact that 1 in 4 have a counsellor to deal with paedophiles. Now, 1 in 4 is the abuse group.
Yeah.
Now, I find this very strange. It seemed to get a lot of support at the time, but I mean, isn't it like the Rape Crisis Centre having counselling rapists? Anybody?
Well, there was one thing there on the Late Late Show, it was years ago, and I don't know, I just remember seeing it with my father, and he just went mental. Like, how could anyone give a platform to this guy? And I was going, well, it's kind of interesting to see how this guy thinks. It must be very brave for him to come on and actually talk about why he did this. And I think there was a shadow on him. Like, he was on the Late Late Show, God, maybe 15 years ago. And I thought maybe, obviously it's terrifying to look at. These people expose and to understand exactly their motives and how they operate. You know, they're not dirty old men going around in anoraks anymore, you know. They're people in privileged positions. And it's right across the board. So you say, like, you know, should there be a counsellor with 1 and 4? In order with anything, we have to understand the problem, you know, if we're going to fix it.
I think this is like the opposite of chemical castration. For instance, Mary Rafferty, great journalist, there's a Mary Rafferty Trust Fund, you know, for journalism projects in the Irish Times, and the last one was a piece on paedophiles, and one in particular, myself and Olga knew from the site. He just lied, you know.
It's pathology.
I beg your pardon?
It's a pathology.
Yeah, but so here you have the Mary Raftery Fund being used to promote lies from a paedophile. I would say the same about 1 and 4. Why on earth are they dealing with paedophiles when they should be just dealing exclusively with victims?
I'm not going to talk about any individual cases, but you have to kind of say at some level, you have to believe in redemption at some level, that there is redemption. I'm not saying that I won't go into any individual cases. I won't talk about it, anything. I'm talking in generalities, but I suppose it's a human condition to believe in that there is redemption. Whether that's true or not, I don't know.
Well, I think it's entirely up to the victim to decide whether somebody's redeemed or not. I would say that there's a very strange attitude towards paedophilia in Ireland, and I think it is kind of generational. I think there were people in the 90s, Derek, you'd have known them as well. I won't say who they were, but they actually just didn't even believe abuse existed. You know,
but look,
you know, they literally didn't. They thought that it was.
But again, this applies to a whole range of things. That we look back at Ireland in the 50s and 60s and see it as having this pastoral view of it, etc., and that the only thing that was going wrong in Ireland at the time was mass emigration. Of course, there wasn't.
Yeah, but Derek,
if you got pregnant outside marriage, you ended up in Grange Gorman. I mean, my parents worked in Grange Gorman. I remember using summer holidays jobs there. I was full of women who had gone in there pregnant and were institutionalized for the rest of their life, signed away by the local doctor. So I mean, it is a range of social problems in Ireland, and I would argue not just Ireland. You look across Central Europe and Eastern Europe, and you see the same parochial attitudes or the same little attitudes as well. In terms of paedophilia, I think there's a belief that it doesn't happen, or it was, as Johnny was saying earlier, it is that that he's a bit odd. That fella, that fella's a bit odd, and he's a bit touched or something like that. I mean, there was a kind of brushing it aside. There was also, you didn't believe kids. If a child said something about a teacher, you didn't believe them. It was a hierarchical institutional society, which if a child made an allegation, made a claim, they were automatically disbelieved. So there's a whole range of things within this.
Yeah, Tony, it's one thing that you know, we have a suicide epidemic in Ireland, and the sex abuse correlation is never discussed. The possibility that these are linked, that these two things are linked.
I think it's well documented, though, especially like studies across the Europe and the more developed world, whereby people they carry I hate to be.
But there's very few discussion, but very little discussion here. Say if you have a suicide cluster, say in Middleton or something like that.
Yeah, what the underlying
it could be one basketball coach, or it could be it could be one. These are hypothetical situations here. But
the hypothetical situations, but for example, in Belfast, where there were specific cases, there were specific instances where there was very, very high suicide rates. A lot of it was socioeconomic, which is people who just don't see a future. I mean, there was a whole range, and there can be a range of reasons. I think this cause and effect, and trying to find one single cause is possibly. I think you can end up going down the wrong avenue on that. There could well be, and it should be something that's looked at. But I think there's, unfortunately, in suicide, that the prevalence and the increasing rates, particularly about young males, is terrifying, and it really is a scary thing.
Well, I mean, as Tony said, there are studies across the world about suicide. In fact, Olga is from Middleton, which is probably the highest suicide rate in Ireland. But what Tony was saying is never really discussed here. You know, when you hear the shows about suicide clusters, and it's very rarely discussed in Ireland, actually, that there might be a link there.
It was a debate. Sorry, go ahead, Olga.
Oh yeah, no.
Welcome, Olga. Olga's she's just had a shift. She's had a shift in Dublin. Not a shift.
Olga, there you go again.
There I go again.
Okay.
Yeah.
Not a shift. Not that kind of shift. It's work.
It's always that kind of
That's a
shift.
cork work. That's a cork work.
It's newspaper shit. Anyway.
So yeah, the link between suicide clusters and paedophilia, yeah, I mean, it would seem like a very obvious and worthy investigation.
Yeah. Well, it's just something that we've seen it ourselves. Olga, certainly with the Gibney story.
Yes, yeah, and actually, yeah, I presume you guys were talking about Tom Humphreys and stuff.
Yeah.
A couple of people were on. There was heartbreaking stuff on Liveline during the week, and several people mentioned George Gibney. So he was a swimming coach. You probably all know he's a swimming coach, and he's in the States. And there's a journalist in America who's trying to get his immigration file to find out how basically he got into the States, because Justine McCarthy in the Sunday Times reported there was 2 years ago, John, about how he basically got a Garda reference to get to the States as part of his visa application.
Yeah,
so,
but I think it was actually more than that, because I think he was very highly connected.
Yeah, very connected. And of course, there was the whole judicial review where he was represented by a senior counsel.
Yeah, Susan Denham's brother. He was representing him, and Susan Denham was on the Supreme Court that day. This decision then went back to the High Court.
Yeah.
Gibney was freed, and he raped a girl in Florida. He was allowed into the States and raped a girl in Florida. So it's what we're exporting, you know.
Yeah. But just to say, so that journalist Irvin Muchnick in the States, so it's a Freedom of Information request, and he's won it. But it's basically they're just in this process of kind of making the terms of it. So it should be, and actually it should have been. I think yesterday there was supposed to be something on it, but that might happen sooner than later.
But it'll be redacted, I guess. Not a lot of it.
Yeah, but it's still fair play to him for not giving up. You know, yeah, I know you're in agreement, but there
were three. The other two coaches, Derry O'Rourke and.
Derry O'Rourke and.
I've forgotten his name anyway. There were convictions made, but Gibney got away, and Gibney obviously knows a lot.
Yeah.
But he's not sort of telling, and maybe that's his price for not coming back.
Yeah, there were several. I think wasn't there 5 coaches altogether that were kind of eventually all convicted. Well, bar Gibney, Frank McGann as well. If you remember, he wasn't it Frank McGann who killed his wife and his a child he fathered? Yeah. So
Justine McCarthy has a great book on it, Deep Deceptions. At the end of the book, she concludes that there wasn't she didn't believe that they were in cahoots.
There was a paedophile ring, yeah.
But I thought it was pretty obvious that they were. I mean,
but actually,
one victim was passed from one to another.
Remember, so when after Derry O'Rourke was convicted, the then sports minister, I think was it Roderick Murphy, he launched this investigation, and so there was this report, and I think in that report, one of the victims said that one of the coaches who was abusing kids told her to get into a car with another coach who was abusing. So I don't know. Justin McCarthy would know a lot more than me, but yeah.
Yeah, the problem with these kind of stories is that you just you can't do them a lot. You can't do them all the time because we were doing this. We were doing the child murders over the summer, and they just take a lot out of. It's pretty grim stuff, isn't it?
Very, very. It's not pleasant.
Anyway, go to you, Derek, and ask you to move on to another subject. The JFK files are about to be released, or have they been released tonight?
They're out, yeah.
They're out. They're out, Tony?
Yeah, no, I saw it. Someone sent me them and said, "You'll love this," and I said, "It must become a conspiracy nut."
Derek, are you a JFK aficionado, the conspiracy?
I'm not a conspiracy nut on JFK. I do tend to believe Lee Harvey Oswald did it. I don't think there was a guy in the grassy knoll, but there again, I wasn't there. I think one of the interesting points is that these documents have been released. There's only a handful of documents that are still completely out of the public domain. A lot of this stuff was handed over to the archive a number of years ago. So it's about 88% of the documentation has been in the public domain, and there's another whatever percentage. The only thing I keep thinking is that there's an element with Donald Trump of, look, squirrel, in terms of this, which is, I have problems over here. I now want you to look at JFK. I want you to look at that. And there was some way that Hillary Clinton was on the grassy knoll, or she was in Dealey Plaza, if not Podesta. I just wonder if this hasn't been put out there for the erudition and for the education of the public. This is put out there to deflect. But I don't think, as far as I can make out, there's not going to be much in them.
Well, Derek, this was scheduled to come out today.
Yeah.
And it was Trump could have delayed it for another 25 years, and he chose not to. And I think if Hillary had been in the White House, she would have delayed it for another 25 years.
Who knows? I don't know. But he didn't say, I'm delaying it. He basically announced 2 or 3 days ago, I'm going to ensure that these are released. Yeah. I am the one who's going to make sure that these are released. And like, there was something that was coming up and he chose not to block it. It does, to me, it still smacks of, look over here. Stop looking at me. Look at this thing over here. But it's reflection.
Okay, can I ask everybody on the panel, who did Oswald act alone? Johnny?
CIA.
Neil?
CIA.
No, he didn't, in my opinion.
Look at the time. Sorry.
Olga?
I don't know, John. I don't know.
Telly?
I'm with Olga. I'm not going to make a judgment yet.
Yes. Okay.
I reckon it was aliens.
Yeah.
On a serious level, like during that time, John F. Kennedy was shot, his brother was shot, Martin Luther King was shot, Malcolm X was shot. You know, there was not a lot of angry Polish and Russian immigrants going into America just to kill all these prominent politicians. Give me a break, lads. The FBI has been proven in the court of law that the FBI did actually, Google this if you want, did actually kill Martin Luther King. So that's been proven in the court of law, but the media don't seem to want to talk about that. So there's no doubt about it. And I'll go one further. The CIA would have killed the likes of John Lennon. They would have killed the likes of Bob Marley. So there you go. Anyone who was a serious threat to peace and unity in the world, the CIA want to put a cap in these people's ass. John F. Kennedy was supposed to...
It worked very well for the CIA. They really succeeded on based on what they were trying to do then.
Derek, can you move closer to the mic?
I'm saying, if that's the CIA's aim, then it didn't really work for them.
How do you mean?
They thought that knocking out Martin Luther King, knocking out Robert Kennedy, Bob Kennedy, John F. Kennedy, etc., was going to kind of stop this world towards peace and the rest of it. It didn't work. The world fell apart. It didn't maintain any great order.
Derek.
Do I think the CIA gets up to crap? Of course they do. That's what they do. Spies spy. Shock horror. I mean, they're at this level, no.
But Derek,
this is silly stuff.
Derek, I have to say, I mean,
yes.
I regard. I mean, I've been interested in the assassination all my life, and because he was an Irish American, president, and I wasn't interested in him coming to Ireland, but who murdered him? And I think, I mean, it's a false mystery. It's so obviously a conspiracy. It's clearly a coup d'etat. It was obviously Oswald was a CIA.
It was a coup d'etat to put in Lyndon Johnson, who was more liberal and more reforming than Kennedy was. Kennedy's legislative record was piss poor. It was actually Johnson who actually brought in the Great Society. It was Johnson who brought in Medicare. It was Johnson who brought in the Civil Rights Acts. It was Johnson who legislated for this. So if the intention was to get rid of a liberal and put in a Conservative. Well, it went exactly the other way.
Well, I think it's a little bit more
Lyndon Johnson had been all his life a Conservative. All his life was a centrist. And suddenly, when he becomes president and he has the job, he actually did things. Like he screwed up Vietnam. And
Derek, hang on, Derek. You're seeing it purely in a political point of view.
Yeah.
Kennedy was killed because he was threatening to smash the CIA into 1,000 pieces. After the Bay of Pigs, he fired Alan Dulles. And who was on the Warren Commission? Alan Dulles.
Yeah.
Any sort of even a superficial research of this tells me that it was obviously a conspiracy.
Well,
and in fact,
it really is a superficial.
In fact, it's very interesting that the disinformation. Like I remember seeing documentaries in the 70s that were on BBC, and I've since learned that they were disinformation themselves. But those are the documentaries and the CIA's object. They invented the term conspiracy theorist about Kennedy researchers because they were getting so close to the truth, and to dismiss them as sort of kooks. The thing about the Warren Commission, or the thing about the conspiracy, the CIA's object was to get focus people on the grassy knoll, to get them talking about the grassy knoll for 35 years, 40 years. Yeah. So for me, as a kind of conspiracy nut, bona fide, 100%.
And I can see the tinfoil hat behind you.
Yeah, so that is.
There's many tinfoil hats.
Incredibly
I can see the edge of the flat earth out your window.
Absolutely.
Well, I have to say that I think what's going to happen in the next 4 years.
I like the cook.
I think what's going to happen I think we're into a period of revelations, and I think the JFK is just the first. You'll see the moon landing in about 2 years being exposed. I mean, certain myths are going to be busted.
Rewind there, John. Did you say the moon landing is a myth?
That's what they're waiting for. So this happened in a car park in Canada or something, or whatever. I don't know what. I mean,
It was
John, here's a better question to the panel as well.
It didn't happen in a car park.
Oh, you're going to tell me that this is because the flag doesn't wave. The flag doesn't
John.
No, it's not. You see, this is the point. I mean, if you do cursory research, like we've spoken about stuff, right? And that I'm pretty informed about stuff, I guess. I mean, I'm not a raving, drooling lunatic, right?
No, I grant you that one.
Okay. So I'd be afraid of ridicule as the next man, right?
Yeah.
So why would I put my neck out for this? If I didn't feel 100%, I've done the research. You guys obviously haven't. It's cool. That's fine. It's fine. I mean, I'm ahead of you in that sense. Okay.
Yeah.
So
away you go. And as you head off into the distance, into that little lonely path, I'm going way ahead of me. Away you go.
Well, I think
the problem is, if there was a conspiracy, the conspiracy for Kennedy's assassination ended up in Lyndon Johnson becoming president. And I don't see what the conspiracy achieved.
Derek, Johnson was part of the conspiracy. Do you not understand that it could?
I've seen executive action. I've seen the movie. I don't believe it. I don't see
executive
anything
action.
behind it.
But Derek, if you're watching executive action and you think that that's the basis.
No, I don't. But what I'm saying to you is the thing about this that. Okay, there's various theories behind it, being that Johnson was going to be dropped as vice president in the next term and all this kind of stuff and the rest of it. Johnson was an accidental president. He kept on most of Kennedy's cabinet. If there was an attempt to do a coup d'etat, well, then why was Bob McNamara kept on? Why were so many of the Kennedy people kept on? There isn't. What I'm saying to you is, I want to see the outputs. Let's look at the outputs. Let's look at what this resulted in. And I don't see that.
He threatened. Okay. Well, we won't go there because we really could be here all night. Yeah. But I'll go toe to toe with you, Derek, anytime.
I have no problem with that. I have no difficulty with that.
My point is, I'm really surprised. I'm actually surprised, Derek. Like, you're a man of some years, like myself, and
Oh, so we're going to insults now, are we?
No, I genuinely mean this. I feel it's incumbent on people our age to know what's what, really,
Yeah, there's no lack of curiosity on my part. There's no, and I'm not saying, I mean, I might be a fan of follower, but that doesn't mean that I believe everything that I'm told. But it's
try and sell everything.
I have done a reasonable amount of this, and I accept it. You're right that there are issues within the Warren Commission. The Warren Commission has huge inaccuracies in it, so there are major gaps in it. But
Do you know the reason why? Okay, I don't want to dominate this whole evening about this, but the reason why the conspiracies began with the JFK assassination is that the Warren Commission was such a thin kind of record of what had happened that they just said, you know what, throw all the evidence in.
Oh, there's 8 volumes or 9 volumes of the report.
24 volumes,
Sorry, yeah.
I think, 24 volumes, and they assumed nobody in their right mind would read it. In fact, but there were a few people who read it, and they cross-referenced pre-internet days. They did card referencing, and there's like hundreds and hundreds of anomalies there, Derek. You know.
Yeah, but the problem is, you see, for example, like we mentioned one before we came on air, which is the supposed magic bullet, which is the bullet that went through Kennedy and went through Connolly, and people are saying because of the trajectory it couldn't have happened. Well, the problem with it is because the seat that Connolly was sitting in front of Kennedy was not directly in front of Kennedy. It was in front of Kennedy and whatever it was, 8 or 10 inches
Derek,
to the left. So
Derek,
what I'm saying to you is, but
I know.
No, just let me finish the point, which is
Okay.
that's therefore I say, right, that this conspiracy has proven wrong. But then people then pop up and said, yeah, that conspiracy is proven wrong because the CIA put that conspiracy out there, so it would be proven wrong, and people would say, no, let's go back to the default position, which was Oswald acting alone. What I'm saying is you can build conspiracy on top of conspiracy.
No.
So that you don't reach something at the end of it. And that's the point where I just come back to, I don't, did the CIA were knocking off leaders all over the world? Of course they were.
Derek,
No, just so convenient. Like your man, Patsy, what's his name? Oswald killed him, and then Ruby killed Oswald. You know, that was. Yeah, that's
but the Jack Ruby stuff is fascinating because Jack Ruby had. I mean, there's more chance of a mafia connection in this through Ruby, etc., than there is through a CIA connection.
Okay.
And if you can go back and you can bring my hero Frank Sinatra into it, who swung Chicago so that Kennedy would beat Nixon. I mean, there's various other bits and pieces you can look into this as well.
I think we're into a period of big disclosures and a lot of people with egg in their faces, and people who talk about conspiracy nuts. It's getting a bit old now, Derek. You know.
Yeah, but think about this. What if the conspiracy people are wrong?
I beg your pardon?
What if they're wrong? I mean, the whole point about it is
it's a theory. It's a theory, Derek. You know,
the lack of intellectual curiosity cuts both ways on this one.
Yeah,
and
but
it does cut both ways because
the official story doesn't stand up, Derek. It never stood up. That's the point. You know.
I'm not too sure about that.
Even Einstein got it wrong.
Listen,
I have a question, John. Well, 2 questions. Just getting back to the moon landing one.
Oh.
So if you think the moon landing is conspiracy, do you follow the conspiracy theory that there's superstructures on the dark side of the moon?
No. I don't think we've been anywhere above low orbit. And
we should do a conspiracy theory week.
Right, yeah. Can I just ask a question there as well? Edward Snowden wants amnesty from Ireland. Do you think we should give it to him?
Give him what?
Edward Snowden, he's looking for amnesty in Ireland.
We already voted against it, Johnny.
We did vote against it.
We voted against there was 37 MEPs or whatever it was, or 137 MEPs voted in the European Parliament. And Ireland, the only people, all the Fine Gael representative MEPs voted no. Flanagan and the Shinners.
Flanagan and Shinners. The NUG group voted in favour, yeah.
Yeah, so we voted no as in bulk in Ireland. So without recourse to the people, Fine Gael chose no.
Doesn't he just epitomise everything that we're talking about in the last while in relation to whistleblowers and being a good citizen for the greater good? Right. You know, so why Edward Snowden wouldn't be given amnesty in Ireland just illustrates the point again how Americanized we are. We're not Irish.
I'm not going to go that route with you, which is first of all, Snowden did the world a huge favor, but not for the reasons he thinks. One of the reasons why there's a thing in terms of data being sent to the United States. There's a now thing there called the Privacy Shield, so that European citizens' data cannot be sent to the United States, only on very, very certain circumstances, because and it's been accepted through the Patriot Act, etc. That this stuff has been bulk processed by the CIA or the National Security Agency, and it was the fact that Snowden exposed this was what knocked the old privacy shield on the head when Max Schrems took Facebook to court in Ireland. So I mean, that is one of the benefits of what Snowden did. But Snowden stuff is incredibly self-serving. I mean, he is a whistleblower, but there's levels within this. The manner in which he did it, I think there is that he did something. He joined, like, I mean, he started off. He was a member of the CIA. This isn't some low-level operative who found himself in. It's not like the Manning case, the Chelsea Manning, who just found themselves way over their heads. Snowden was a senior enough operative, so Snowden knew what he was doing when he was seeing his postal abroad.
So was the guy, and I can't think of his name, from the Vietnam papers who blew the whistle there. And,
Daniel Ellsberg. Yeah,
Ellsberg. Like, and he knew, like, he knew the nuclear fallout, that in the event of Russia striking at America, he knew that 20 million people in Western Europe are going to die. He was very senior. He saw that, and he still. So no, Snow. I'm not going to go. Snowden. I'm with Johnny on this. Snowden did the right thing, and it's never the wrong time to do the right thing.
Well, I think Ellsberg and Snowden, I think their backgrounds are a little bit iffy, but I don't want to be too conspiratorial tonight.
I'm not being conspiratorial at all on these two.
Yeah, I know. That's the real problem.
We talked about redemption. We talked about redemption there earlier on. That is redemption. If he was in the CIA and he was doing that, he just had
I'm not saying my argument isn't
a moment of clarity. People can get moments of clarity and they can change. But there needs to be some serious understanding about how that process happens. What we've covered tonight, these people are innocent, these people are guilty,
Yeah.
Right and wrong seems to be a grey area in 2017.
Life is a grey area.
Sad, really.
There's large areas of grey within life. That's
there's nothing,
the issue.
There's nothing grey about tomorrow's front covers, though, Colin.
Wow, that's a stretch.
What a segue.
John.
Sorry.
Wow.
Well, there is a split in the camp in the EU, or sorry, in the UN in relation to allowing for abortion in cases of fatal fetal abnormality. So, the UN Human Rights Committee has said for years that we should be allowed to have abortions in the case of fetal abnormality, but the UN Committee on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities has objected. So that's the splash in the Irish Times. It asks up on the top, tracker controversy, have the banks come clean? I don't know. I presume you guys talked about that.
We did.
We resolved it.
Yeah, did you? Fair play. Okay. Spain's had to impose direct rule in Catalonia. And there's a story at the bottom, which I think just kind of people became aware of this evening. So Noreen O'Sullivan has got a new job. So she's going to be Director of Strategic Partnerships for Europe with the International Association of Chiefs of Police. I personally never even heard of it, but my understanding is that it's a newly created position, and she's going to be the first. It's going to be the first time that the organisation will have a staff member outside of the States. So apparently she'll still remain in Ireland, and I don't think it's known yet when she's going to start, because next month she's expected to appear, or late November, early December, she's expected to appear in the Disclosures Tribunal.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Should we tell them? I don't know.
Tell them. So you say again?
Should we tell them?
Sorry, yeah.
So if she's in a position, or she gets that position and she goes to the tribunal, will she be able to claim expenses?
You mean in the sense of, what do you mean right now? Like,
if she gets that position that she's going for, seems to be being made for her.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm sorry. I'm just being smart.
No,
Okay.
Sorry, she will be based in Ireland. I think, but it's not going to take her out of the country. Anyway, so plot to freeze banks, assets quashed. That's splash in the Examiner. Independent.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Oh, there. Yeah.
Independent Alliance rebuked over bid to revoke banking licenses. It's a story by Dan Connell. The Independent Alliance, because the way they were saying that earlier this week, they said that the assets of the banks should be frozen and their banking license revoked over the traffic mortgage scandal. But they were rebuked strongly by Finance Minister Pascal Donoghue.
They were admonished, were they?
Yeah, exactly. In robust exchanges behind closed doors with Transport Minister Shane Ross and Junior Jobs Minister John Halligan, Mr Donoghue warned that they risked causing a run on the banks were they to publicly demand such a move. The standoff occurred on Tuesday as Mr Donoghue was finalising his meetings with commercial banks, and it has been confirmed that he requested forcibly that they pull back from issuing such a statement. But didn't they only yesterday say that they wanted a criminal investigation? Well, obviously they didn't, no?
I was in a this motion as far as I remember.
Yeah,
But did they not have a public, like a press conference yesterday?
Tony, why are they being rebuked?
Why are they being rebuked? Because Leo already wolf whistled to the banks and said that the Garda wouldn't be called yesterday. He came, like, while Pascal was talking tough inside the doors, Leo was outside the door saying that, warning people that it may not be possible to call the Gardaí. All that wasn't aimed. That was literally saying to the banks that the Gardaí aren't going to be coming through your door. There's not going to be any, no requirement to start shredding documents or anything like that. So that matter was put to bed yesterday.
Mm.
Okay. The rise in homeless.
So the figures came out this evening, and I think there's about 76 more children homeless. I think if I got that correct, and I think about another 30 or 40 adults. I think the figures are up by 100 and something. So there's now 8,374 people who used emergency accommodation in the final week of September. So
3,124 children.
Yeah, exactly.
Derek, I have to say that I don't think Fianna Fáil would allow that.
How do you mean?
I have a feeling that Fianna Fáil would have got to grips with this crisis a bit quicker than Fine Gael. I've just get a sense that there's some policy on board that they don't mind people sleeping on streets.
I know. Look, there's lots of incentive for me to score points off Fine Gael on this, and I'm not going to do that. I do believe that the problem with this one is that there is an intrinsic belief in Fine Gael that the market will eventually correct itself, that the market will find its own level, and it needs to do that. And that is clearly not going to happen. This is a dysfunctional market. I think the most scary headline in the last couple of days has been the fact that that people in Dublin, that rents are up to 55% of your income. That's not a sustainable thing. That Dublin cannot survive on that basis. I mean, I was talking to somebody a couple of days ago who's working in the IT sector, who's earning about 55, 60 grand. And they're now heading away. They're heading off to Germany because they cannot afford to live in Dublin. Why should they? Their review is, why should I be sharing an apartment, basically renting a room in an apartment, spending a lot of money crossing town to keep a job at 55 grand? Now that's not a sustainable situation. So I think the difficulty seems to be, what I will grant you is, I think Fianna Fáil at this stage would have just gone and built social houses.
Yeah, but then start decentralisation, Derek.
What's wrong with decentralisation?
Exactly. Well, why wasn't it followed through on?
It didn't work.
It was followed through to a certain degree, because what you did, the main part of decentralisation was moving a load of civil servants out. I was in a department at the time where it was way oversubscribed.
Yeah. Well, the same thing is the country thing again.
But there was a national spatial strategy, which was to say, they had these satellite towns and these rural, and that's what the motorway was supposed to link up, etc. And the problem is that big picture is missing. But Dublin, having said, the problem with Dublin is unbalances the country. Dublin will always be that centre, and but now we're at a situation where Dublin is now repelling people, but the rest of the country is going to pay a price for that. Dublin cannot function the way it's continuing.
It's a long way to go yet, Derek. I think I'm in California a lot, and when you see the lengths that people are willing to go to, particularly in the Bay Area, San Francisco and San Jose, it's not uncommon to see people paying that kind of money in house shares, couples and everything. So
true enough, but the difficulty here is that you've got a better market functioning in Germany and the rest of it. You don't have to go terribly far.
I don't know,
when the industry is at a level, in terms of, we have a lot of IT sector station here, but it's a while since we developed any new products here. Whereas Microsoft, whatever it was, 810 or whatever it was, wasn't developed here, as that was now in India. So that there is an attraction, there is as much a pull out as much as there's a repelling from our side. So I think there is a difficulty there.
I think the Germany one might be an exception, though. I mean, certainly up to a certain generation, we're not great on language skills as native Irish people. So, in an English-speaking country.
I'm back and forth to Germany a fair bit, and the rest of us now, I don't sprechen the Deutsch. But most people, for the vast, I think it's English is the second spoken language of the vast majority of people in Germany. It's not an impediment.
Okay. Any other papers there?
Sorry, yeah, just 2 seconds. There's a story there actually on the Examiner. I didn't mention it there, but it's the far right. It's about, hang on 2 seconds. It's about TUSLA, and it's about mandatory reporting of child abuse. Sorry to go back to that topic, but it's basically saying that TUSLA's basically saying that it's supposed to kick off in 6 weeks, but they're saying that they're no way capable, like they're just not ready if they'd be overwhelmed. But it's I think, I don't know, without going down again the road of conspiracies, I do think it's funny how we've had a lot of stories about TUSLA being overwhelmed and unallocated files and etc. since the tribunal started with Maurice McCabe, in relation to Maurice McCabe, because his case was a case that sat there. But anyway.
Is there? Do you have the Times Irish edition?
The Times, did it come through?
It has come through, and it's got a story just referring to what we were talking about. EU urged to look into cartel claim on trackers.
Okay.
Derek?
I'll get it there.
This is probably the imperative we need to start taking this seriously, and it goes back to the point Johnny made earlier, and the rest of it. It's not. I don't believe the ECB is going to come in on this, but that other European, like, we damn nearly. Tony made this point earlier. The Irish banking system damn nearly took down the European banking system, and with the Deauville Declaration, we were told that the euro had to be defended on Irish soil, and that's the price we paid for it, which is why we ended up with the 42%. But I think the ECB are not going to let us, not so much the ECB, but the European are not going to let us away with this again.
They're not going to let us away with this again because we didn't regulate the banks.
Yeah, as simple and straightforward as that.
Yeah.
And they're not going to have the Irish banking, a kind of an errant Irish banking system. And the thing about this, which is going back to Germany, which is that the German banks were up to the rockstars here. So you had Hyper Real Estate, Commerzbank. I mean, the Irish economy damn nearly took down Deutsche Bank and Commerzbank.
Yeah.
They're 10 times bigger now, Derek. Though down the IFSC, they're bigger than they ever were.
Yeah.
Really, Tony?
Which now they have definitely more skin in the game.
Because the IFSC alone is actually the total trades in the IFSC is 10 times bigger than the Irish total GDP, the entire economy, 10 times bigger.
Yeah.
So that's what, and our central bank don't want to know what's going on down there because they say that's a German matter or an Italian matter, or you just have to ask the Oireachtas Finance Committee because they said the same thing. Oh, we're only looking at Irish banks. So we have a huge shadow banking system here. And I've got a hands up. I'm going to tell you, I'm not averse to it. I think that there's we have a good. People say we're not a tax haven. I say we are. I say we're actually one of the best tax havens in the world because we've got a transparent tax haven. We pass all the transparency tests, and that's actually why we get this money. We're a WAVN pipe. If you're gonna be a filter for shit, you might as well be a clean WAVN pipe. All the shit may flow through, but if you've got a clean WAVN pipe, bring it on.
Not like those dirty Cayman pipes.
No, but that's the truth though. They fail. The transparency. Go look at Transparency International. Ireland is up there with the best of them. All of the British Virgin Islands, all your Cayman Islands, they don't get certified like we do. We put our hands up, and it's actually a selling point that we're a tax haven. We might as well have it on flashing on the keys.
And I suppose long may continue, Derek. Is that the plan?
I'm not okay. I would dispute the idea, the depiction of us as a tax haven. But I think in terms of the transparency, the difficulty, Europe's problem with us is not 12.5%. It's 0.5%. That's our difficulty. That's the 0.5%. Yeah.
The 0.5% is because we know that the WAVN pipe that we have only rushes through the funds from all over the world, and we only deal with what's invoiced here, and we tax that as well. And
by the way, but we're not unique in that. The French were up to that as well.
Oh yeah, and I'm if the French turned around tomorrow and said we want Ireland to play fair, I'd say that's grand. We'll have a cut of your manufacturing, or if you want proper European solidarity, give us a cut of the oil and gas that you guys have. Or not. We don't have natural resources coming out of our ears or anything like that. We have got a corporate tax base that's attractive. And that's actually one of our main selling points on the global market. So I'm not.
No, we actually do have resources, and Fianna Fáil gave up them for us.
I was just about to say that, Johnny. Fair play to you.
That's it. It only took an hour and 25
Yeah.
minutes.
You got off lightly tonight, Dirk.
I'm aware of this. I'm still standing. I can't believe it.
I'll get. You have the Times Irish edition there.
Yeah, so can you see it there? So, the European Commission has been urged to investigate whether the operation of a banking cartel to the tracker mortgage scandal. Brian Hayes is the person he wrote to Margaret Vestager. This was on, actually, I think, was it One earlier today?
All right.
So he spoke about how, he's written to Margaret Vestager, the EU's competition commissioner, asking her to examine whether financial institutions intentionally collaborated to ensure that customers were not charged.
Can we point out the irony in him writing to Margaret Vestager?
I think it'd be better if he wrote to Leo Varadkar.
That's the same Apple guy, right?
Yeah,
Margaret, she's the competition authority, and she's her only hope because she's kicking Apple around, she's kicking Luxembourg around, she's kicking the Netherlands around. She's the one that has actually made some inroads. She's the one that gave us lower insurance premiums. It wasn't our central bank; it was her office.
Yeah.
Well, and the photograph there is of Keelan Shanley and Katrina Perry, who are new presenters of the 6-1 News on RT1, replacing Brian Dobson, who's moved to Morning Ireland, and Sharon Nivuelan, who's gone to 9 o'clock News. Anybody want to?
I'm surprised yourself and Olga didn't get that.
Hilarious.
I think
I sent out emails, never.
Us too.
I think Keelan Shanley is one of the sharpest journalists in RTE who they don't use nearly enough. She's only ever been used to fill in pro. I know she got a morning time TV slot at one stage. Certainly she was doing stuff during the election diaries.
Yeah.
But it never really worked out, and I'm glad to see that she has a proper platform, because I think people are going to realise that she is a superb TV journalist.
Yeah.
And she's a superb interviewer.
I agree. Neil?
Yeah, I was just wondering, because I'm not as au fait in journalism as some of you guys are, but taking Katrina Perry now, which if she's hosting the news, like given she was a correspondent in the US, would that not be, as a journalist, would your goal not to be more on the investigative reporting side rather than hosting the news itself?
Yeah, you would think. That's why I was thinking that Keelan Shanley was a bad choice, in the sense that
She'd be better.
They're basically just reading.
Script.
Yeah, but
that's what I know. Yeah,
but they're not quite. We're not back to the days of Maurice O'Doherty and Charles Mitchell, where they're basically actors. In fairness, they do interviews. I mean, Brian Dobson has done some fairly decent interviews on the 6-1 News.
Maybe 2 a year or something. Yeah, but I get your point.
Thank you. that was a lovely backhander. I just felt the breeze come past my head.
But Peter Falk told him about to answer questions as well.
I think we're going to have to. Are there any other pickers there?
The Sun. There was the Sun. Yeah. The cops are now going to investigate the cup thing, the strippers in the cup.
Call it what it is, strippers.
You know. It is funny how the GAA did decide to comment on that, but not on the Tom Humphreys. Well, actually, that's not fair. The Camogie Association did release a statement to RTE.
A systematic ripping off of the Irish people to the tune of millions of people losing their homes, and the guards aren't involved, and a couple of strippers at a GAA thing, and they're involved.
It's a great little country.
Okay, on that bombshell, we'll say goodnight. I thought it was what's that?
Don't mind me, I'm just plugging my own.
Sorry, I beg your pardon. I meant to plug. Tony's running the marathon.
I'm aiming at Derek here. Olga, you were very good, and thanks very much.
No problem.
Derek, you open that big wallet of yours. I want to see a donation in my GoFundMe page. All right.
Tony's doing the Dublin City Marathon on Sunday for Inner City Helping Homeless.
Inner City Helping Homeless, and all money is going to Anthony Flynn's team out there on the front line, who do lots of great work. Who, from taking, spotting rough sleepers. You know yourself, lads. They're out there with soup and feeding people. They're out there they're looking for sleeping bags, and they really are the front line of what is a crisis in our city at the moment.
Okay, and so that's on Sunday. And Tony, Tony GoFundMe?
Just GoFundMe, and my name is the name of the campaign, because my name was the name of the campaign we were running at.
Okay, great. So Tony Groves, and we'll hopefully see you on the site tomorrow. I just want to say goodbye from Derek Mooney, from Johnny Keenan, from Neil Curran, Olga Cronin, Tony Groves, and myself, John Posterous Ryan. Hopefully see you on the site tomorrow, and if not, we'll see you here hopefully next week. Okay, thank you.
Right.
Awkward plans.